It is day 12 of this invasion, and for anyone who didn't join us last week, we were speaking to you on Friday. It struck me that we should start our conversation today as you've watched things. What has changed since Friday, and what would you say as we begin this week is the situation on the ground?
Well, what has changed? The bombardments are becoming more intense. We're seeing more Russian air force in the air, dropping bombs. The encirclement of Kyiv is almost complete. Both columns on the west and east side of the river probably are almost looking at each other right now. That long convoy is steaming towards the city, and I think it's loaded with artillery ammunition to continue the bombardment. The Russians seem to be in good shape. The Ukrainians are preparing. The crowds outside the recruiting posts, registration posts are large. Refugees continue. And I think this week is going to be long and bloody. The bombardment, as I said before, will become more intense, even though diplomacy continues. And we're right now at 1.7 million Ukrainians have flown the country.
Yes.
And that will continue as well. So I don't see any new developments, but certainly a more intense bombardment around the cities. And of course, once Odessa falls, the entire south of the country will be sealed off. So the Russian intent to isolate the Ukraine is working, and we shall see. I wish I could look into the future and tell you, but I can't.
Well, let's try to do that a little bit. What I would like you to help me do is look inside conference rooms. It struck me when we spoke on Friday that as a former NATO war planner, when you were based in Heidelberg, Germany, what is going on right now in the face of what you say, likely to be long and bloody and very difficult conflict to come? What are the things that they are planning right now? What are the scenarios that they will be trying to envisage and to plan for in NATO offices and in Europe right now?
Well, as I said last week, the lines between NATO headquarters and the members of the alliance are probably burning all day and all night, working up plans to reinforce, not reinforce, but to send more equipment and maybe better, heavier equipment to the Ukraine. That's probably being developed. There's an initiative to put alliance planes via Poland into the air. I don't put much confidence in that. They'll be blown out of the air by the Russian Air Force as soon as they appear. And it's also a very dicey move that could in fact escalate and cause even more difficulties.
Sorry, let me just jump in on that, because maybe people aren't following that. That has really been the push in light of the fact that there is no move for NATO to declare a no-fly zone, which you support, I know. What the latest thing that we're hearing, and Secretary of State Antony Blinken is now stressing, is trying to get U.S. F-16 fighter planes into Poland to backfill so that they can then send MiG jets and Sukhoi jets, Soviet-style jets, into Ukraine so Ukrainian pilots can fly those. And you're suggesting that you think this is really what they're, I think one of the things they'll be talking about keenly today. You think there's a lot of risk attached to that plan?
I think there's a tremendous amount of risk because, of course, you don't know how Putin and his entourage, his political entourage, will react to that kind of escalation. And that's what it is. It's escalation. That is a good or bad idea. I'm not prepared to say, but you can imagine the alliance's position. Here, the alliance cannot, for all kinds of good reasons, establish alliance airspace over Ukraine with a no-fly zone. So they've got to do something, and they've reacted with this plan to reinforce the Ukrainian Air Force. I don't put much hope to it. It's simply something that can go terribly, terribly wrong. All of our good intentions aside.
So the planning that is going on, as you said, lines burning up. I'm just wondering, there was the attack on the nuclear power plant when last we spoke on Friday. Over the weekend, we have just seen excruciating video of families carrying their, mourning over dead children, of attacks directly on families trying to flee those humanitarian corridors, huge and heavy bombardment of civilian areas. How might those instances, those visuals, those kinds of attacks, how might they affect the planning?
Well, there's certainly a tremendous amount of political pressure throughout the alliance to do something and to help the Ukrainians and make it all stop before the blood bill becomes too great. We'll see what happens. The logistics of it are very straightforward, and that's happening now. The airlifting is going on. You mentioned it, in fact, before. So that's continuing. I hesitate to say this, but from what I can see, that there comes a time when Zelensky and his cabinet have to decide whether this is worth it. Now, I don't think we're there now, but sometime in the future, when the killing becomes even more widespread, Zelensky has to look at whether this is in fact the best course of action for the Ukraine. Now, I know it's a terrible thing to say, to surrender, but lives are in the balance, and martyrdom always ends in death. So I wonder if perhaps that is probably not being talked about right now in the Ukraine, but at some point in the future, that'll have to be addressed, whether it is in fact worth it. Look at the map and look what the Russians are doing. They have almost completely completed the encirclement of Kyiv. Many of the other major towns are under shelling. The noose is tightening, and it's tightening very quickly. And just how much of a bloodbath are the Allies permitted or will permit? Because of course this makes for very bad news across the alliance. So this is very much up for grabs. Now, the reason I projected that into the future is that it just seems to me one of the decisions that may not be maybe is not being discussed now, but will be in the future, because the question is there: is this all worth it? Is all of this emotion and all of this loss, is it worth it if it's going to continue and become even worse? I just put that out as a possible point of discussion. It looks like the Ukrainians are ready to take the fight to the Russians, and the Russians are ready to increase bombardment. So it's a situation that is going from very bad to very worse.